Chapter 11. Dr. Frank. From the first moment of the first day of coursework through to the end of my accelerated master's degree in reproductive science, I was singularly focused, to the point of obsession, in learning as much as I could about the past and present technological advances of creating life. Although I dutifully attended my classes and met with my all-white male professors as required, I found their teachings most rudimentary. Most of the knowledge I acquired during that time that truly mattered to me was self-taught, and it was this acquisition in which I became most invested. My roommate, Henry, tried to invite me to study sessions with the other students or to share pints of beer with him and his girlfriend, but he quickly learned I had no interest in any kind of social discourse or friendship. Simply put, I had no time for such trivialities. The rest of the students in my cohort learned this about me within a matter of a few weeks. Since most of them were from somewhere in the United Kingdom, I assumed they misread my peculiar behavior as being particularly American and didn't take it personally. If anything, this misperception only made it easier for me to pursue my own intellectual curiosities and suffer fewer distractions. It was the professors themselves that were the least prepared to deal with me. I surpassed all academic expectations, which, unsurprisingly, impressed the faculty in the department, especially when I transitioned into my graduate work after receiving a Bachelor's of Science in their accelerated track. However, it quickly became clear to most of the faculty I had no interest in anything they could offer me. I found them, for the most part, conservative and slow in their willingness to experiment with the latest reproductive technologies. I, on the other hand, was so impassioned by my ambitions that I didn't see the dangers of my own impatience and haste for laboratory technology to catch up with my idealistic spirit. I remember a particular exchange with Dr. Sullivan, my professor in IVF topics, during an open seminar on the latest innovations regarding in vitro fertilization technologies and ethical dilemmas. I had spent most of the course arguing with him, insisting that my perspective on the future of reproductive technology was the only way to see it, and that progress always mattered more than ethical concerns. Many class sessions would devolve into heated debates between the two of us to the extent that even the other students halted any interjections they might have thought of offering to the conversation. Then, just before finals, at the end of one particular class session, Dr. Sullivan asked in a forced nonchalance to see me after class. The students looked over at me with intrigue and worry in their eyes, but as I had not formed intimate attachments with any of them, I found their concerns rather invasive. After a few minutes, just Dr. Sullivan and I remained in the small classroom. I walked to the front room, where he sat at a desk just in front of the blackboard, still marked with his notes for that day's session. "You wanted to see me?" I said, without much thought. I believed he had nothing especially insightful to offer, and having to stay after was merely a waste of my time. Dr. Sullivan stood up from his desk and pushed his chair back so that he could walk over to where I stood. He had a full head of salt and pepper hair, thick spectacles, and he wore a worn black suit with dusty layer of chalk coating his lapels. Dr. Sullivan placed his spectacles in the pocket of his blazer and rubbed his temples with his fingers, a move I had seen him perform many times when the two of us became embroiled in a heated debate. "Zoel," he said, looking me over in my suspenders and trousers, my thin patterned tie and crisp white Oxford shirt. Now that I was so far from home and my father was long gone, I found no reason to hide my true nature. Being called Zoel had always made me cringe, and so, as I had done many times before, I corrected him. "Z, if you would, Professor Sullivan." I interrupted as he leaned his bottom against the edge of his desk. The disruption caught him off guard. "Oh yes, I apologize, Z," he corrected, running a hand through his hair. "Is something the matter with my academic performance? What's the issue? I'd love to get back to my room and work on my own I began. But Dr. Sullivan interrupted me. "Yes, Z, this is exactly why I want to speak to you." He motioned for me to sit in one of the desks closest to his own. I sat down at the very edge of the seat, my legs thrust in front of me, taking a quick look at my watch, a gesture meant to indicate I didn't intend to waste much time speaking to a professor who I had already surpassed in wisdom and insight. "Look, I know exactly where you are. I was there once too. He smiled, looking into the distance past me. But what we try to offer here is a space for you to explore these exciting ideas and ambitions while also warning you of what lies just ahead. These dilemmas we face in this course should not be taken lightly. I hope you can appreciate that and spend some time considering that perhaps your faculty know the risks that come with reproductive science. Be wary of believing you can outwit nature, he said with a wink, fixing a steadfast gaze on me in hopes it would penetrate. I appreciate your feedback and concern, I said curtly, offended that anyone believed that they could teach me anything about a field I had conquered as a young child. Please think about what I've said. IVF and stem cell research come with many ethical issues. It is simply not possible for a burgeoning student to have a thorough understanding of their hazardous potential. Believe me, you'll see. I just hope you learn this before it's too late. Dr. Sullivan tried one last time, and then sighed as I nodded silently and excused myself from the classroom. I wish I could say I took what Dr. Sullivan and my other graduate faculty said to heart, that I questioned my own ego and belief in my intellectual prowess. I see now that my professors were trying to warn me. In a similar manner, I now hope to urge you to take caution. So much of ethical restraint lies far beyond the technology possibility of science. In other words, just because science enables us to perform a particular advancement in the development of new life doesn't mean we should. I hope for your sake you don't learn the hard way, like I did. At some point during this very exciting period of intensive focus and inquiry, Hannah wrote to me, incredibly pleased that she had discerned a way to visit me at Oxford with her parents' blessing. I was delighted to receive her letter, as I was eager to share with her all I had uncovered in the years since our last reunion. But then something happened that caused me to refrain from replying to her missive and request at the last minute. By complete happenstance, I came upon an article that reported a pioneering experiment in which the scientist used the stem cells from the skin of mice in order to create an embryo without using either egg or sperm. To the scientist's complete astonishment, the embryo did indeed implant in the womb of the mouse, and the mouse gave birth to a healthy mouse pup. In order to do this, they basically injected the embryo with genetic material in order to confuse the body into believing it was an embryo that consisted of both male and female chromosomal material. Unsurprisingly, the scientists cautioned against being too excited about what this experiment could mean for the future of creating human life for queer couples, those who desired to have children without a partner, or people with vaginas interested in having children past childbearing age who were considered too old for fertility treatment. What this technology could lead to, the scientists warned, was what he called designer fertility, in which a person could find stealthy ways to come into the possession of the stem cells of a candidate they found a desirable genetic parent without consent. As you might predict, I did not heed the article's warning. Instead, I felt as though a ray of light had permeated the darkness of my isolation. You also must understand that, at that point in my life, I had found men only provided my life with a sense of powerlessness. So even thinking back on it now, I can see I felt a kind of urgency to find a way that a person with a vagina could further their own genetic line without needing to rely on cis men whatsoever. Please remember that I am not recounting the delusions of an unwell person. It is true we do indeed have the technology to need neither egg nor sperm to create life. After many excruciatingly exhausting hours of study and experiments, I finally discovered I was able to create a child using any kind of genetic material I could find. Further, I learned I could inject the material to physically imprint whatever details I desired in this child. Height, weight, muscle mass, eye color, hair color, skin complexion, etc. The entire future of human perfection lay quite literally at my fingertips. I can say that perhaps there was something of my own father in my itchy push toward this discovery. From my vantage point, my entire existence was owed to a man, but also burdened by his sense of what he was owed on his very deathbed. He aimed to do to me what he had done to my mother, to force me into a life with someone I did not love. My mother had merely left one servitude for another, and what made matters worse was the knowledge that she did this for me, to provide a life for her children she could never have as a poor, working child of a single mother. Perhaps I wanted to prove to myself that I didn't need a man to do anything, not even to create human life. I urgently hoped Hannah and I would be able to create life together, somewhere, somehow, especially now that my father was gone. We wouldn't even need to count on a man to donate his sperm to us. We wouldn't have to wonder if, at any moment, he would return, as men often do, to take back what they felt was theirs to possess. As I became so singularly focused on how I could change the course of reproductive science forever, as well as chart my own legacy, it completely slipped my mind that Ezra might still be giving this deathbed request any heed whatsoever. To say I delighted in the power of my discovery is an understatement. I foresaw no obstacle to my goal, and in fact, the visions that occupied my thoughts and dreams constellated mostly on the future progeny of my design. I saw myself as a benevolent God who could create complex, flawless, mixed-race, non-binary creatures. They would be the ideal combination of all the best parts of human life and embodiment. Like Frederick Douglass predicted in The Future of the Colored Race in 1886, races and varieties of the human family appear and disappear, but humanity remains and will remain forever. I can see by the way you lean forward and the sparkle in your eyes that you're hoping I'll tell you the secret behind the technology I discovered and through which I made a name for myself. You're trying to be coy, but I've been at this a while. I can see it in the quick flutter of your eyes, the rapid breath you think I can't hear. Certainly I, above all others, can empathize with the power of another's ambition on which you hope to model your own future progress and success. But I would be hard-pressed to find a single listener of this story who would feel the same eagerness upon hearing the end of my tale. I cannot, in good faith, lead you to a path of destruction as has happened to me. Please, I beg you, as I recount to you what led to my tragedy, learn from my example how dangerous knowledge that goes unquestioned is, and how much more fulfilled and content the person who creates within the world, and not beyond it, and nature, is. I did experience a few days here and there in which I engaged in late-night episodes of extreme self-doubt, uncertain as to whether I should pursue this technology of creating what I conceived of as the perfect human life. Although I had acquired the knowledge and skills to achieve what I was after, it was still an incredibly new and as yet unverifiable technology for humans. Because I knew that colleagues in the field, fellow classmates, or even faculty members would only seek to prevent me from this work, there was not a single soul I could speak to about this venture, which, at times, left me in a state of anxiety. At first, I wondered if I should only experiment with getting rid of sperm specifically, but stick to fertilizing an embryo with a woman's egg. But as you can imagine, I was too enthralled with the possibilities of my vision and discovery to stop short. Besides, I rationalized, if I drew back from my initial idea, wouldn't I just be like all those others I had judged previously for not pursuing science to the farthest ambition? I was completely convinced that nothing could stand in my way, that I had absolute control and oversight over this project at hand. I did not consider for a second all of the possible obstacles that could have kept me from achieving my perfect being. What I did know was that I could not use someone else's laboratory or provisions in order to make this being. I had to be in absolute control and hold sovereignty over every aspect of the experiment. I also did not want there to be any opportunity for another scientist to steal my ideas and take credit for the many years of work that had come to fruition in this new venture. I still had a small set of funds left over from my inheritance I acquired when my father passed. I used the inheritance to purchase land and develop the laboratory you know well, which provided the site of your position and the occasion for us to meet. as I began to hire technicians, interns, and supervisors to manage the lab, and to hopefully bring in funding that could support future endeavors, I developed a restricted wing that would be off limits to every single person but me. It was heavily secured with a key card and a code that only I have access to. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds that I should first break through and then pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. I could already imagine all the queer and non-normative parents who would feel endless gratitude for what I had been able to give them. It is from this hopeful spirit I wrote The Frankenstein Dilemma, the book you mentioned that provoked you to do this work. It was a strategy on my part. If I exposed both my own ideas to a point, but also the dilemma surrounding them, I hoped it would cause others to pull back from work like mine and leave these type of experiments only to me and me alone. But I don't believe anyone who read it, reviewed it, or studied my most well-known work knew exactly how close I was to this achievement, like spinning in front of a sun just before you burn. It took me many months of trials to perfect the technology in such a manner as to feel confident to implant a healthy embryo into a woman's uterine lining. I decided to start this experiment by using an animal as well, but given my own hubris at the time, no ordinary lab mouse would do. I had my contacts ship over 2 female pygmy tarsiers, the smallest primates in the world, from my mother's Indonesia. I was enjoying the symbolism of having these 2 female creatures from my mother's homeland make a child together. They were soft and fuzzy, like small monkeys, but with pug-like eyes that seemed ready to pop out of their heads. Using a process called in vitro gametogenesis, also known as IVG, I planned to use the cells from the tarsier that would not carry the embryo, but transform them into material that could be mistaken as sperm and egg, that could then create the embryo that would be implanted into the tarsier that would carry the pup. It was tricky science, but I had no doubt I would be successful. I was told from the employees I crossed paths with as I entered the office each morning or left very late at night that our southern summer was absolutely exquisite that year, the region having had a most curious change which resulted in a lower humidity and heat index. But, as for me, I didn't know anything about it as I became so fixated on the project at hand, working at all hours of the morning and night. I neglected all the letters my mother, Ezra, and Hannah sent to me once they learned I was close by. I remembered that just as I was leaving Oxford, my mother had written to me to let me know my grandmother had died in her sleep, imploring me to come home for her memorial service, and in either case, entreating me to keep my mother in my thoughts now and again. I received the true message behind her request, to remember her and my loved ones in my desperate obsession with my ambition. But I was unable to tear my eyes away from what I imagined would be worth all the distance I had built between myself and all those I loved. Once they realized what I had achieved, the entire world would be indebted to me and my endeavors. I imagined all the riches that would be bestowed on me, that the ones I loved would never want for anything again. The remaining seasons of the year passed in much the same manner as that summer. I had no time for such flights of fancy as observing the world change. In retrospect, it was the uncontrollable quality of the changes in nature that I should have been more attentive to, as they may have led me to understand what I didn't see before it was too late. My cheeks grew sallow, and my body became thinner and thinner as I sacrificed food and wellness in order to reach the end of my quest. There were times I experienced brief moments of self-consciousness and reflection regarding how I must appear to others, not unlike the day you and your supervisor found me in my harried and unreasonable state. But I did not think much of it beyond a moment or two, and promptly I wormholed my way back to my pursuit, which was all that had the power to matter to me.